What does the radiation do to them, precisely?
Ionizing radiation tears the cellular structure apart. The skin blisters, turns red, then black. This is followed by a latency period. The immediate effects subside. The patient appears to be recovering. Healthy even, but they aren't. Cellular damage begins to manifest. The bone marrow dies. The immune system fails. The organs and soft tissue begin to decompose. The arteries and veins spill open like sieves, to the point where you can't even administer morphine for the pain, which is unimaginable. Within 3 days to 3 weeks, you're dead.
Welcome to the Binge List. I'm your host, Paul Chappell, and today I am reviewing Chernobyl, and I only say review because that's just what I say, because as you know, this is a review channel. But I don't think that really captures what it is about this show that makes it what it is. You can't really review a show like this. This is one of those rare instances where I'm going to say there was no critical points I can make about this show that aren't good. In fact, I would go as far as to say that everyone should be required to watch this show. That's how good it is. That's how important the topic is. And I can only say that about maybe a couple other movies or projects in the history of cinema. One of those would probably be Schindler's List or Roots or something like 2001: A Space Odyssey. They're just cinematic masterpieces and also historical documents that should be required of every student, really every American. I go as far as to say required viewing for anybody in any English-speaking country, because Chernobyl is almost like a documentary. And I say that because you by the end of this miniseries, there's only 5 episodes, but by the end of this miniseries, you will understand the dangers of nuclear power, the dangers of secrecy in government, the dangers of propaganda. You also understand how one of the things that struck me in this film was that, or this miniseries, is that when I was growing up, the Soviet Union was the enemy. And in case you're one of those people who've been living on a rock, Chernobyl was a nuclear power plant in the Ukraine that had not even a meltdown, it exploded in 1986. And it spread nuclear radiation over Europe, mostly in Belarus and Ukraine, but mostly in those areas. But it was so disastrous that it was, the radiation levels was being detected as far as Sweden, Great Britain, Scotland, those places. So it was such an unmitigated disaster. A lot of people think that Ronald Reagan and the Star Wars program brought down the Soviet Union. But if you talk to Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the Soviet leader at the time, he will tell you that Chernobyl was probably the disaster that brought the end to the Soviet Union, because the estimates vary, but for the most part, it cost the Soviet Union something like $18 billion during the cleanup. So it was a substantial disaster. It had far-reaching implications. It almost poisoned the whole of Europe. And for that reason, I'll say that this miniseries is also kind of a horror miniseries or horror movie, whatever you want to call it. I've actually heard some other reviewers refer to it as a horror movie because there are some instances during this miniseries where they describe the effects of radiation. They describe the dangers involved in radiation. And when you hear the main character, who's played up by Jared Harris, he plays a scientist, a nuclear scientist named Valery Legasov. When you hear him describe what radiation does to the body, it's stomach churning. And the fact that you cannot see radiation is just, it's very scary, very scary. And I kept having to remind myself, I was a young boy when this nuclear accident happened. I mean, it's not something that I could look at and say, oh, that happened way before I was born. This is actually something that happened when I was a kid. So I had to keep reminding myself that, and it just scared me. And there were just so many instances where the effects of this radiation is just being, explained, and you're just like, it really couldn't be that bad, could it? But yes, it was something terrifying, and I don't think a lot of people, mostly in Soviet Union, didn't realize what kind of danger they were in.
An RBMK reactor uses uranium-235 as fuel. Winds will carry radioactive particles across the entire continent. Rain will bring them down on us. That's 3 million, billion, trillion bullets in the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. Most of these bullets will not stop firing for 100 years. Some of them not for 50,000 years.
A lot of people that sent to do the cleanup did not know what trouble they were in. And the movie goes through all that. The movie breaks down this disaster at every level, from the secrecy, because in the movie you find out that there was a fatal flaw in the design of Chernobyl's particular reactor. I think it's called an RMK reactor. But there was a flaw that the KGB classified because they didn't want the Western nations to think that the Soviet state could make such a mistake. And then there was another level where there was a level of incompetence on the part of the people that ran the nuclear reactor too. They go into that, they break it down. They break down the science. But you also find throughout watching this show that there was many heroes. And growing up in the United States when we were in the Cold War, I got used to seeing the Soviet Union and Russians in particular as the bad guys. And you see that some of these Russians, some of these Ukrainians, or whatever you want to call them, because I think ethnically a lot of the characters in the show are either Ukrainian or Russian. But you find out that there was some really intelligent people in the Soviet Union, but there was also a lot of badasses, because there was a bunch of people that volunteered, knowing that they would likely die within a short amount of time, who went in and risked their lives to make sure that, because there was a point during the disaster where it could have gotten much worse. There was a chance that Chernobyl was going to melt down through the ground and seep into the groundwater and poison millions of people. And the miniseries documents how some of these Soviet scientists volunteered to, like in one instance, they volunteered to go open a gate, a sluice gate, to drain out the water so that disaster doesn't happen. Well, these three guys volunteered to do that. You also just see the heroics of the military. They're dropping sand and boron on the reactor itself. And you just see these, just like I said, these badasses. And I was not used to seeing Russians portrayed in that light. And it really impressed me that no matter where you are in the world, there are going to be heroes. There are going to be people just like you. There are going to be intelligent people. And we just have this tendency to demonize other sides, other countries, other people. And this show just demonstrated to me that no, America does not have a monopoly on greatness. It does not have a monopoly on people with intelligence and bravery and all those things we think of when we think of the highest virtues of American life. So, like I said, this should be required viewing because particularly in the later episodes, because we see what happens when a nation is ruled through fear and propaganda and secrecy. Because later in the series, it actually becomes, I would say this miniseries is three things. It's a horror movie, it's a documentary, and it's a political thriller. And broadly speaking, is a drama because there's a lot of human elements. There's a lot of following of characters on the periphery who were directly affected. There was a wife of a firefighter. These firefighters went to the plant not knowing that the reactor had actually blown up. And part of the story follows the wife of one of those firefighters, played by Jesse Buckley, an Irish actor. But we also had international cast, really. We had Stellan Skarsgård, who, if you're a Marvel fan, you know he plays a big part in the MCU. He was in Avengers and he was in Thor. But he's just a great actor. Emily Watson is actually playing a composite of a bunch of scientists, but she plays a character called Yelena Kamyuk. I think that's how you pronounce her name. But I think she was the only character that they had to really create, and they created her just as a narrative expediency. They needed somebody who could distill in one person the various other scientists that were involved. Just made it a little bit easier to follow along, but she did a really great job. But as I said, Jared Harris of Mad Men fame, I think he was in Sherlock Holmes, the sequel, he played Moriarty, but he's the main character, and he gave his life to expose the futility of the Soviet Union trying to cover up this disaster. He gave his life so that the world would know what happened at Chernobyl, and that hopefully it will never be repeated. So I don't know. I don't want to go too much further. Go see it. Right now, I mean, you obviously have to have a HBO subscription to watch this. If you're like me, you watched Game of Thrones, you were disappointed, and I was actually at the point I was going to just unsubscribe from HBO, and this is the only thing that kept me from unsubscribing, and I'm glad that I didn't unsubscribe because this is just a great miniseries, and like I said, it's important that people understand what happened, and I hope that the creators of this show carry on and maybe do some other shows about some other important issues, because the way this show just was unfolded was just masterful in every way, and I just can't wait to see what they have in store for us in the future. And like I said, it's the highest rated show on IMDb right now. So it has that distinction. And like I said, if you're looking to see what to do with your HBO subscription at this point, this is be a good way to, keep it for another week to check this out. So that's all I really got to say about Chernobyl. Go watch it. It's fascinating. It's well done in every way, and you will be better for watching it. But that's all I got for today. I'd like to thank my subscribers. And if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give me a like. And I thank you for visiting today. And I will see you when I see you. Thanks for watching.